The blood on the cowboy's shirt had dried to a rust-brown stain that spread across his shoulder like a map of pain. And Sarah Winters knew that if she did not steady her trembling hands, she would never finish mending the tear that ran from collar to chest. The lamplight flickered in the small room above the general store in Malad City, Idaho, casting shadows that danced across the stranger's face as he sat perfectly still on the wooden chair, watching her with eyes the color of storm clouds over the mountains. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, his voice rough as gravel underfoot. "I can find someone else." Sarah's fingers fumbled with the needle, and she had to bite her lip to keep from dropping it entirely. "There is no one else. Mrs. Patterson is visiting her sister in Salt Lake City, and the seamstress, who used to work at the hotel, left last month to get married." She threaded the needle on her third attempt, forcing herself to focus on the task rather than the way his bare shoulder gleamed in the lamplight, or the long scar that ran down his ribs, or the fact that she was alone with a man she had met only that afternoon. The year was 1882, and respectable young women did not find themselves in such situations. But Sarah had stopped worrying about respectability the day her father died and left her with nothing but debts, and the small room she rented above Mr. Henderson's store. She worked 12 hours a day helping run the shop, took in mending when she could, and tried not to think about the life she might have had if things had been different. "What's your name?" she asked, more to distract herself than from genuine curiosity, though she found she did want to know. "James Brennan," he said. "Most people call me just Brennan." "And what brings you to Malad City, Mr. Brennan?" Sarah leaned closer, squinting at the torn fabric. The shirt was well made, better quality than most of the cowboys who passed through town could afford. The bullet had grazed him, leaving a shallow furrow across his shoulder that he had bandaged himself before coming to find her. He had explained this all very matter-of-factly when he appeared at the store just before closing, asking if anyone could mend his only good shirt. "Work," he said simply. "I heard the ranches around here were hiring for the season." Sarah knew this was true. Spring had arrived early this year, melting the snow from the valleys and bringing new life to the grasslands that stretched endlessly in every direction. The cattle ranches needed men to help with branding, moving herds to summer pastures, and a dozen other tasks that required strong backs and skilled hands. Malad City, small as it was, served as a gathering point for cowboys looking for work and ranchers looking for help. She pressed the needle through the fabric, pulling the thread taut with fingers that still shook despite her best efforts. The trembling had started when he removed his shirt, revealing a body marked by hard labor and harder living. She was 22 years old and had never been this close to a half-dressed man, had never smelled the combination of leather and sage, and something uniquely masculine that seemed to emanate from his skin. "You're shaking," he observed, and there was no judgment in his voice, only a gentle concern that made her chest tighten. "I know," she whispered, hating the admission. "I am sorry. It has been a long day." This was true enough, though not the whole truth. Mr. Henderson had been in a foul mood all morning, snapping at her over minor mistakes and complaining about the cost of goods from the suppliers. Then Mrs. Morrison had come in to settle her account, only to argue for 30 minutes about prices she swore had been different last month. By the time James Brennan walked through the door with his ruined shirt and his quiet voice, Sarah's nerves were already frayed to breaking. His hands moved then, large and calloused, covering hers with a warmth that startled her. "Here," he said softly. "Let me help." He did not take the needle from her, but instead steadied her hands with his own, his fingers wrapping gently around hers until the trembling ceased. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. She should pull away, should insist on propriety. should do any number of things that a respectable young woman would do. Instead, she sat frozen, feeling the roughness of his palms against her skin, the strength in his grip, the way his thumbs rested against her wrists where her pulse beat like a frightened bird. "There," he murmured. "That's better." She forced herself to breathe, to move, to continue the stitching that had become 10 times more difficult now, that she was acutely aware of every point where their skin touched. The threads slipped through the fabric with agonizing slowness, each stitch a small battle won against her distraction. "You have kind hands," he said after a moment. "Gentle." Sarah nearly dropped the needle again. No one had ever commented on her hands before, except to note how red and rough they had become from work. She glanced up at him and found him watching her face with an intensity that made her want to look away and lean closer all at once. "You should not say such things," she managed. "Why not, if they are true?" "Because we are strangers, and it is not proper, and because you will leave as soon as I finish this shirt and I will never see you again." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, honest and raw in a way she had not intended. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes that might have been sadness or understanding or both. "What if I stayed in Malad City? I need work. You said the ranches are hiring." "They are," Sarah confirmed, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. "The Bar M Ranch especially. Mr. Mitchell was in the store just yesterday saying he needed at least 5 more men for the season. Then maybe I will try there." His hands still covered hers, still steadied them as she worked. "And maybe, if I get hired, I could come back to town on my days off. Maybe I could see you again." "Mr. Brennan," she began, but he shook his head. "James, please." "James," she amended, testing his name on her tongue and finding she liked the shape of it. "You do not know anything about me. I might be promised to someone. I might have a dozen unsuitable qualities that would make you regret such an interest." He smiled then, a slow curve of his lips that transformed his entire face from stern to warm. "Are you promised to someone?" "No." "Do you have unsuitable qualities I should know about?" Despite everything, Sarah felt her own mouth twitch toward a smile. "I am too stubborn, according to my late father. I have opinions about things women are not supposed to have opinions about. I read too much. I forgot my place," he said more than once. "Your place," James repeated, and there was an edge to his voice now. "And where exactly is a woman's place supposed to be? Silent, obedient, grateful for whatever scraps of life men allow her to have." The bitterness in her words surprised her. She had not realized she was carrying quite so much anger until it spilled out. "That sounds like hell," James said bluntly. "If you ask me, a woman's place is wherever she damn well wants it to be, same as a man's." Sarah's hands stilled completely, and not from trembling this time. She stared at him, searching his face for signs of mockery or dishonesty, but found only frank sincerity. "You do not mean that." "I do. My mother ran our ranch after my father died. She could outride, outshoot, and outthink most of the men in 3 counties. She taught me that strength and wisdom do not belong to one sex alone." His thumb traced a small circle against her wrist, and Sarah wondered if he knew he was doing it. "So if you are stubborn and opinionated and well-read, those sound like virtues to me, not faults." She had to look down at the shirt then, had to focus on the stitching before she did something foolish like cry or kiss him or both. No one had ever spoken to her this way, with such casual respect for her thoughts and feelings. Certainly not her father, who had loved her in his way, but had always seemed faintly disappointed that she had not been born a son. Not the few young men who had tried courting her before the money ran out, and she became just another poor girl working in a shop. "I am almost finished," she said, though several inches of torn fabric still needed mending. She did not want to be finished. She wanted to sit here in this pool of lamplight with his hands on hers for hours more, days more, forever. "Take your time," James said. "I am in no hurry." So Sarah took her time, making each stitch smaller and neater than necessary, doubling back to reinforce seams that did not strictly need reinforcing. She asked him questions about his life, and he answered with a frankness that suggested he had nothing to hide. He had grown up in Colorado, he told her, on a ranch his parents had built from nothing. His mother had died 3 years ago, and his father had followed her 6 months later, leaving James and his 2 younger brothers to sell the place and split the proceeds. "I gave my share to my brothers," he explained. "They wanted to try their hand at business in Denver. I wanted to keep working with cattle and horses, so I have been moving from ranch to ranch, taking seasonal work. Do you miss them, your brothers, every day? But they are building good lives for themselves. Matthew married last year and has a baby on the way. Luke is talking about opening a second store. They are happy, and that makes the missing easier to bear." Sarah finished the last stitch and tied off the thread, but she did not pull her hands away from his. "I never had siblings," she said quietly. "It was just me and my father after my mother died. I was very young. I barely remember her. That must have been lonely." It was. She had never admitted this to anyone, but somehow it felt safe to tell him. "Especially after he died last year. I had no one then. No family, no close friends, just work and this room and the endless sameness of every day." James's grip on her hands tightened. "You are not alone now. Am I not? You are a stranger passing through town, James Brennan. Tomorrow you will ride out to the Barham Ranch, and even if they hire you, I will be here and you will be there, and this moment will become just a memory of one evening when a cowboy needed his shirt mended. Is that what you want?" His voice had dropped low, intimate in the quiet room. "For this to be just a memory?" Sarah finally looked up, meeting his eyes directly. They were beautiful, she realized, gray, blue, and intense beneath dark brows. She could see genuine interest there, genuine caring, and something else that made her stomach flutter with nerves and hope and fear all tangled together. "It does not matter what I want," she said. "Wanting does not change reality. It could." He shifted on the chair, turning to face her more fully. "If I get hired at the Barham, I will come to town every Sunday. I will find you. We will talk, get to know each other properly. And if you discover that you like me half as much as I already like you, then maybe wanting could change reality after all." Her breath came shallow now, her pulse racing beneath his touch. "You barely know me. Then let me know you, give me that chance." "Why?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. "Why me?" James was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because when I walked into that store this afternoon, you were arguing with a woman about the price of flour. You were patient and firm and kind, even though she was being unreasonable. You did not back down when she tried to bully you, but you did not lose your temper either. You just stood your ground with this quiet dignity that made me stop and stare." He paused, a rueful smile crossing his face. "Then when you agreed to mend my shirt, you looked so serious and determined, like you were preparing for battle instead of simple sewing. And now, sitting here with you, listening to you talk, feeling your hands shake because you are nervous but doing the work anyway because you said you would, I think I have met someone remarkable, someone I would be a fool not to pursue." Sarah could not speak. Words seemed to have abandoned her entirely, driven out by the pounding of her heart and the warmth flooding through her veins. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this was real and not just the lonely imaginings of a girl too long without affection or hope. "Stay," James said, and for a confused moment she thought he was asking her to stay in the room, but then she realized he meant something bigger, something that encompassed all the fear and possibility crackling in the air between them. "Do not pull away. Do not tell me this is impossible. Just stay with me in this moment and tell me you will give me a chance." She should say no. She should be sensible and cautious and protect her heart from the inevitable pain of caring for someone who could leave at any time. Cowboys were wanderers by nature, here today and gone tomorrow, following work and weather and whim across the endless western territories. But looking at him now, feeling the solid warmth of his hands on hers, seeing the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, Sarah found she could not be sensible. "Not tonight, not with him. I will give you a chance," she whispered, "if you truly want it." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, bright and warm and full of promise. "I want it. I want you to know that right now. I cannot imagine wanting anything more." Then he did something that stole whatever remaining breath she had in her lungs. He lifted her hands to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, gentle and reverent, his eyes closing briefly as if savoring the moment. When he looked at her again, Sarah saw her own wonder reflected back at her. "I should let you go," he said, though he made no move to release her. "It is getting late and you need your rest. I know." But she did not pull away either. They sat there in the lamplight, hands clasped, the mended shirt forgotten on his lap, and let the moment stretch out until it felt almost holy in its quiet intensity. Finally, reluctantly, Sarah drew back. "You should try on the shirt," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Make sure the stitching holds properly." James nodded and stood, unfolding his tall frame from the chair. He was even larger standing, broad-shouldered and lean-waisted, moving with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin. He pulled the shirt on carefully, testing the shoulder, flexing his arm to check the range of motion. "Perfect," he pronounced. "You do excellent work, Miss Winters." "Sarah," she said. "If I am to call you James, you should call me Sarah." His smile returned, softer this time but no less warm. "Sarah," he repeated, and hearing her name in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. "What do I owe you for the mending?" She named a modest price, and he paid without haggling, adding an extra $1 that she tried to refuse. "For your skill," he insisted. "And for your time and your company, which were worth far more than any price I could pay." Sarah tucked the coins into her pocket, hyper-aware of how small the room seemed with him standing, how close they were, how easy it would be to take one step forward and close the distance between them. But she stayed where she was, knowing that some lines should not be crossed, not yet, maybe not ever if things did not work out as he hoped. "When will you go to the bar?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, first light. Mr. Mitchell is expecting new applicants, according to the man I spoke to at the saloon." He reached for his hat, which he had left on her small table, then paused. "May I walk you downstairs? Make sure you get safely to your door." "I am already at my door," she pointed out. "This is where I live." He glanced around the small room, taking in the narrow bed, the washstand, the trunk that held all her worldly possessions, the shelf of books that represented her one extravagance. She saw him notice the darned stockings hanging to dry, the mended dress on its peg, the countless small signs of genteel poverty that she had long stopped trying to hide. "You live here alone?" he asked, and there was concern in his voice, not judgment. "I do. It is not much, but it is mine. Mr. Henderson rents it to me cheap in exchange for opening the store most mornings." "You deserve better," James said quietly. "Perhaps, but this is what I have, and I have learned to be grateful for it." She moved toward the door, suddenly eager to have him gone before she did something embarrassing like beg him not to leave. "Thank you for your custom, James. I hope you find work at the bar." He settled his hat on his head, then looked at her with such intensity that she felt pinned in place. I will see you on Sunday, Sarah, I promise. If you are hired, I will be hired. And even if I am not, I will still come on Sunday. I will find work somewhere close enough to make good on my word. She wanted to tell him not to make promises he might not be able to keep, wanted to protect herself from disappointment, but the determined set of his jaw told her that arguing would be pointless. So instead, she just nodded and opened the door for him. He paused in the doorway, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. For one wild moment she thought he might kiss her, and she did not know if she would pull away or lean in. But he just touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect and farewell. "Good night, Sarah Winters." "Good night, James Brennan." Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the stairs, and she was alone in the lamplight with her racing heart and trembling hands, and the ghost of his touch still warm on her skin. Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, pressing her palms flat against the wood as if she could still feel the impression of his fingers. This was foolish, she told herself. She was being foolish. One conversation, one moment of connection, did not mean anything lasting or real. He might change his mind by morning. He might get hired somewhere far away and forget all about the girl who mended his shirt. He might turn out to be entirely different from the man he had seemed in this room tonight. But even as she thought these things, she did not quite believe them. There had been something in his eyes, something honest and true, that made her think James Brennan was exactly who he appeared to be. A good man looking for a good life and willing to work for it. She changed into her nightgown and washed her face in the basin, going through the familiar rituals of preparing for sleep, while her mind spun with possibilities and fears. When she finally climbed into bed and blew out the lamp, she lay staring at the ceiling in the darkness, reliving every word, every glance, every touch, his hands on hers, his voice saying her name, his promise to return. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like if he kept that promise. If he came back on Sunday and the Sunday after that. If slow conversations grew into deep understanding. If tentative attraction deepened into something real and lasting. She let herself imagine a life beyond this room, beyond the store, beyond the endless routine of work and loneliness. She imagined a home of her own, a partner to share it with, maybe even children someday, laughter and warmth, and all the things she had stopped letting herself dream about. Then she pushed the thoughts away, knowing that hope could be as dangerous as despair if you let it run unchecked. Better to wait and see what tomorrow brought. Better to guard her heart until she knew for certain that James Brennan was worth the risk. But even as she told herself this, she could not quite quell the flutter of excitement in her chest or the smile that curved her lips in the darkness. Sunday, she thought. He promised Sunday, and against all reason and caution, Sarah found herself believing him. The next few days passed with agonizing slowness. Sarah went through her usual routines, opening the store each morning, helping customers, taking inventory, sweeping floors, and counting coins. But everything felt different now, touched with a strange anticipation that made even the most mundane tasks seem charged with meaning. Mr. Henderson noticed her distraction and complained about it more than once. "You are daydreaming again, Miss Winters," he snapped on Thursday when she accidentally gave Mrs. Chen the wrong change. "If you cannot focus on your work, perhaps I should find someone who can." Sarah apologized and forced herself to pay better attention, though it was difficult when her thoughts kept drifting to James. Had he been hired at the bar? Was he already at work, riding the range, doing whatever it was cowboys did? Did he think about her as much as she thought about him? She had no way of knowing. The Bar M Ranch was 10 miles outside town, and she had no reason or means to go there. All she could do was wait and hope and try not to let her disappointment show when Sunday came and he did not, because he might not come. She had to prepare herself for that possibility. He might have found work elsewhere, or changed his mind, or simply forgotten about the girl in the room above the store. These things happened. Men made promises they did not keep all the time. But Saturday night, as she lay in bed trying to sleep, Sarah allowed herself to hope. Just a little. Just enough to make Sunday morning feel like the start of something new. She woke early before dawn, too restless to stay in bed. She washed and dressed with unusual care, choosing her best dress, a deep blue cotton that her father had bought her 2 birthdays ago. It was faded now and had been mended in several places, but it fit her well and brought out the color of her eyes. She braided her dark blonde hair and pinned it up, then looked at herself in the small mirror over her washstand. Not beautiful, she thought critically. Her nose was too sharp, her chin too pointed, her mouth too wide, but not ugly either. Passably pretty if the light was kind and the observer generous. Would James think so? Or would daylight and distance make him realize she was just ordinary after all? Stop it, she told herself firmly. Vanity would not change anything. Either he would come or he would not, and fretting about her appearance was pointless. She went downstairs and helped Mr. Henderson open the store, though they did less business on Sundays. Malad City observed the Sabbath with varying degrees of strictness. The church held services in the morning, the saloon did not open until evening, and most businesses stayed closed except for a few hours in the afternoon to serve travelers passing through. Sarah was not particularly religious, but she appreciated the slower pace of Sundays, the quiet that settled over the town like a benediction. Today, though, the quiet felt oppressive. Every time the door opened, her heart leaped, only to sink again when it was just someone wanting tobacco or sugar or nails. By noon, she had convinced herself that James was not coming. He had found work elsewhere, or decided she was not worth the trouble, or any of 100 other perfectly reasonable explanations for his absence. She was a fool to have hoped. Then the door opened and there he was, and all the air went out of her lungs in a rush. He had cleaned up since she last saw him. His dark hair was still damp from washing, his face freshly shaved, his clothes neat if worn. He held his hat in his hands and looked around the store until his eyes found hers, and then he smiled with such genuine pleasure that Sarah felt her knees go weak. "Good afternoon, Sarah," he said, crossing the space between them in 3 long strides. "I told you I would come." "You did," she managed, aware that Mr. Henderson was watching from behind the counter with undisguised curiosity. "Did you find work?" "I did. Mr. Mitchell hired me and 2 other men. We have been working all week, getting ready for the drive to summer pasture." He glanced at her employer. "I hope you do not mind my calling on Miss Winters, sir. My intentions are entirely honorable." Mr. Henderson harumphed, clearly not sure what to make of this development, but he was not unkind. "See that they stay honorable, young man. Sarah is a good girl. She deserves to be treated with respect." "I have no intention of treating her any other way," James said firmly. Sarah felt color flood her cheeks. "I am due for my break," she told Mr. Henderson. "May I take it now?" He waved her away with obvious reluctance, and Sarah quickly removed her work apron and came around the counter. James offered her his arm with old-fashioned courtesy, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They walked out into the spring sunshine, and Sarah felt the eyes of half the town on them. Malad City was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, and a strange cowboy escorting the orphaned Winters girl was bound to cause talk. But for once, Sarah found she did not care. Let them gossip. Let them speculate. She was tired of living her life according to other people's rules and judgments. "Where would you like to go?" James asked. "I am afraid I do not know the town well yet." "There is a grove of trees by the creek, just past the church," Sarah said. "It is quiet there. We could talk without everyone watching us." They walked in comfortable silence, their steps matching naturally. Sarah was aware of the strength in his arm beneath her hand, the warmth of him beside her, the way he shortened his stride slightly to accommodate her shorter legs. These small courtesies touched her more than grand gestures might have. The grove was empty, as she had hoped. A few cottonwood trees provided dappled shade, and the creek burbled pleasantly over smooth stones. James spread his coat on the grass for her to sit on, and then settled beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body but not so close as to be improper. "I missed you," he said without preamble. "All week, working until my back ached and my hands were raw, all I could think about was this, seeing you again." Sarah's heart did that complicated thing again, that flutter and squeeze that was becoming familiar. "I thought about you too," she admitted. "I tried not to, but I could not help it." "Why would you try not to think about me?" "Because I was afraid you would not come back, because hope is dangerous when you have been disappointed too many times before." James turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I understand that. I have had my share of disappointments too. But I learned something from watching my parents. They used to say that fear of pain is no reason to avoid joy, that life is short and uncertain, and the only real mistake is letting fear stop you from reaching for what you want." "That sounds wise," Sarah said softly. "They were wise, and kind, and braver than I will ever be." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "I want to be brave now, Sarah. I want to reach for what I want, even if it scares me." "What do you want, you?" he said simply. "I want to court you properly, to know everything about you, to see if this feeling I have is the beginning of something that could last a lifetime. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other. But I also know that what I felt the other night, sitting with you, talking with you, was more real than anything I have felt in years. And I would be a fool to walk away from that without at least trying to see where it could go." Sarah could not breathe, could not think, could only stare at him and try to process the fact that this good, honest, handsome man was saying these things to her, plain Sarah Winters who had nothing and no one. "I am poor," she said, and hated how her voice shook. "I have no family, no prospects, nothing to offer you but myself, and even that is not much. I work 12 hours a day for barely enough to survive. I have no dowry, no connections, nothing that would make me a suitable match for anyone." "You have yourself," James said, and his grip on her hand tightened. "And that is everything. Your intelligence, your strength, your kindness, your courage, those things matter more than money or connections ever could." "You barely know me," she protested weakly. "How can you say such things when you barely know me?" "Then let me know you. That is all I am asking. Give me time. Let me court you. We will take things slowly, properly, and if you decide I am not the right man for you, I will accept that. But please do not push me away because you think you are not good enough. You are more than good enough, Sarah. You are everything I did not know I was looking for." A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it, and James reached up with his free hand to gently brush it away. His touch was so tender it made more tears come, years of loneliness and fear and quiet desperation finally finding release. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I do not mean to cry. Do not apologize. You are allowed to feel whatever you feel." He shifted closer, and when she did not pull away, he drew her carefully against his chest, one hand cradling her head while the other remained clasped with hers. "I have you. You are safe. Just breathe." So Sarah breathed and let herself be held, and allowed herself to believe, just for these few precious moments, that maybe she had found someone who would stay. Someone who saw her as she was and wanted her anyway. Someone who might love her. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped together in the shade of the cottonwoods while the creek sang its endless song. Eventually, Sarah's tears stopped, but she did not pull away, and James did not let go. She could hear his heartbeat beneath her ear, strong and steady, and it soothed something deep inside her that had been ragged and raw for too long. "Tell me about your week," she said finally, her voice muffled against his shirt. "What is it like at the bar, Em?" So he told her, painting pictures with his words of wide open spaces and endless sky, of cattle lowing in the dawn light and horses thundering across the grassland. He told her about the other ranch hands, about Mr. Mitchell and his wife, who ran the ranch house with brisk efficiency, about the work that was hard but satisfying, about falling into his bunk each night so exhausted he barely remembered his head hitting the pillow. "But I always thought of you before I slept," he said. "Always wondered what you were doing, if you were well, if you were thinking of me too." "I was," Sarah admitted, "every night, every morning, all the time in between." She felt him smile against her hair. "Good. I would hate to be the only one losing sleep over this." Sarah pulled back just enough to look up at him, and found his face so close to hers that she could count the flecks of darker blue in his gray eyes, could see the faint lines that fanned out from the corners from squinting into the sun. He was beautiful, she thought. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but beautiful in the way of things shaped by purpose and use. His face was honest, open, real. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "That I want to trust this," she said. "That I want to believe you mean what you say. That I am terrified of how much I already care about you." "I am terrified too," he confessed. "I have not let myself care about anyone since my parents died. It seemed safer that way, easier, to just keep moving and working and not letting anyone get close. But then you walked into my life with your trembling hands and your fierce pride and your beautiful eyes, and suddenly safe and easy did not matter anymore. Suddenly, all I wanted was to be brave enough to try." His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "May I kiss you, Sarah?" She should say no. They had only known each other a week, had spent perhaps a handful of hours in each other's company. A proper young woman would insist on more time, more propriety, more certainty before allowing such intimacy. But Sarah was tired of being proper, tired of being careful, tired of protecting herself from living. "Yes," she whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, but Sarah did not move away. When his lips touched hers, it was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a demand. She answered by pressing closer, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, and felt him make a soft sound of satisfaction deep in his throat. The kiss deepened, though it remained tender, careful. He kissed her like she was something precious, something to be cherished and protected, and Sarah felt something inside her shift and settle, like a piece of herself she had not known was missing finally sliding into place. When they finally parted, both breathing harder, James rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do that again," he said, "and again, and about 1,000 more times if you will let me." Sarah laughed, surprising herself. When had she last laughed like that, free and genuine and full of joy? "I think that could be arranged." They spent the rest of the afternoon there by the creek, talking and kissing and learning each other in small increments. Sarah told him about her childhood, about the mother she barely remembered, and the father who had tried his best, but had never quite known what to do with a daughter. She told him about the years after her father's death, the struggle to survive, the quiet desperation of working herself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over her head. "It will not always be like that," James said fiercely. "I swear to you, Sarah, I will work until my hands bleed to give you a better life than that." "I do not need riches," she said. "I just need to feel safe, to know that I will not be alone anymore." "You are not alone, not anymore. I am here and I am staying." The words were a vow, and Sarah accepted them as such, tucking them away in her heart to return to on difficult days. Too soon, the sun began to sink toward the horizon, and Sarah knew she needed to get back to the store. James walked her there, his arm around her waist now, the last pretense of propriety abandoned in the privacy of their walk. At the door, he kissed her once more, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I will come back next Sunday," he said. "And every Sunday after that, for as long as you will have me." "I will have you for as long as you keep coming," Sarah replied. He smiled and touched his hat brim in that gesture she already found endearing, then turned and walked away. Sarah watched him go, her hand pressed to her lips where she could still feel the warmth of his kiss. Mr. Henderson was waiting inside, trying to look stern and not quite succeeding. "That young man is serious about you," he observed. "I hope so," Sarah said. "Are you serious about him?" She considered the question, then nodded slowly. "I think I might be. Is that foolish? Maybe, maybe not." Mr. Henderson's expression softened. "Your father would want you to be happy, Sarah. He would want you to have a good life. If this cowboy can give you that, then maybe he is not so bad." "Thank you," Sarah said softly, surprised by the kindness. Mr. Henderson had always been fair but had never been particularly warm. This felt like a benediction of sorts, a permission to hope. That night, lying in her bed, Sarah let herself dream properly for the first time in years. She dreamed of a future that included James, a home they might build together, a life shared and cherished. She knew it was early, knew she was being reckless with her heart, but she could not seem to help it. For the first time since her father died, Sarah Winters felt alive. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that became the sweetest part of Sarah's life. Every Sunday, without fail, James rode into town to see her. They spent their precious hours together walking, talking, stealing kisses when no one was watching, and slowly building something real and solid between them. He told her about his dreams, about wanting to save enough money to buy his own small ranch someday. Nothing grand, but enough to raise cattle and horses and maybe a family. She told him about her love of books, how reading was her escape from the harshness of daily life, and he surprised her one Sunday by bringing her a novel he had bought from a traveling merchant. "The man said it was good," James said, looking almost shy as he handed it over. "I hope you do not already have it." Sarah looked at the book, a collection of poetry by Walt Whitman, and felt her eyes burn with grateful tears. "I do not have it. Thank you, James. This is the kindest gift anyone has ever given me." "I want to give you 1,000 more," he said seriously. "I want to give you everything that makes you smile like that." The weeks turned into months, spring softening into summer. The work at the Bar M Ranch intensified, and sometimes James could not come on Sundays because the cattle needed moving or the ranch was short-handed. But he always sent word through one of the other hands when he could not come, and he always made up for the missed visit the following week. Sarah found herself changing under the warmth of his affection. She smiled more, laughed more, carried herself with a confidence she had never possessed before. Mr. Henderson noticed and commented on it, and even some of the regular customers remarked that she seemed different somehow, happier. "I am happy," she told Mrs. Chen one afternoon. "Happier than I ever thought I could be." "That cowboy of yours," Mrs. Chen said with approval. "He is good man. I see the way he looks at you, like you are sunrise and sunset all in one." Sarah blushed but could not deny it. James did look at her that way, with such open adoration that it sometimes took her breath away. And she looked at him the same way, no longer trying to hide how much she cared, how deeply she had fallen. Because she had fallen in love with him. Completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly in love. She knew this for certain one Sunday in late June when he arrived at the store with a black eye and split knuckles. Her heart seized with fear at the sight of him. "What happened?" she demanded, pulling him into the back room where they could have privacy. "Who did this to you?" "It is nothing," James said, but he winced when she touched his bruised face. "Just a disagreement with one of the other hands. A disagreement that ended in violence." "He said something I could not let stand," James said quietly. "He made a crude comment about you, about us, and I told him to take it back. He refused, so I made him." "James," Sarah said, torn between exasperation and tenderness, "you cannot get into fights over me. I can and I will not let anyone disrespect you, Sarah. I do not care who it is or what it costs me." She sighed and went to get water and a clean cloth. "Sit down. Let me tend to these." He sat, and she carefully cleaned the blood from his knuckles, her touch as gentle as she could make it. His hands were so much larger than hers, calloused and scarred from years of hard work, but she loved them. Loved their strength, their capability, the way they could be so gentle despite their roughness. "Does Mr. Mitchell know about the fight?" she asked. "Yes." He was not pleased, but when I explained what the other man said, he understood. "He sent Carl packing and told me to take the rest of the day off to get cleaned up." "Good." Sarah finished with his hands and moved to his face, dabbing carefully at the swelling around his eye. "You are going to have quite a bruise." "Worth it," James said and caught her wrist gently. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his voice made her stomach drop. "What is it?" "I love you." The words were simple, direct, completely honest. "I have loved you for weeks now. Maybe since the first night when you were patching my shirt with shaking hands and looking so determined and scared and beautiful all at once. I love you, and I need you to know that before I ask you what I want to ask you." Sarah's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "What do you want to ask me?" James stood, keeping hold of her wrist, and then slowly, carefully, he sank down onto one knee. Sarah stopped breathing entirely. "I know it is soon," he said, looking up at her with those storm-colored eyes. "I know we have only been courting for a few months, but I also know that I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Sarah Winters. I want to marry you, to build a life with you, to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to give you a home and a family and everything you have ever dreamed of. I do not have much to offer you right now except my heart and my hands and my promise that I will work every day to make you happy. But if you will have me, if you will take a chance on me, I swear I will spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple silver with a small blue stone. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "The only thing I kept from home. I would be honored if you would wear it." Sarah looked at the ring, then at his face, then at the ring again. Her vision blurred with tears, and she realized she was crying, great silent sobs that shook her whole body. James started to stand, concern flashing across his face, but she shook her head frantically. "Do not get up," she managed. "I am not sad, I am just overwhelmed. I love you too, James. I love you so much it terrifies me. And yes, I will marry you." The smile that broke across his face was incandescent. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and even though it was slightly too large, it felt perfect. Then he stood and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around while she laughed and cried and held onto him with all her strength. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion he had always kept carefully leashed before, and Sarah kissed him back just as fiercely, pouring all her love and relief and joy into the connection between them. They were breathless when they finally parted, grinning at each other like fools. "When?" Sarah asked. "When do you want to get married?" "Tomorrow, if you would have me," James said. "But I understand if you want to wait to plan something proper." Sarah thought about it for all of 2 seconds. I do not need a fancy wedding or a big celebration. I just need you. Let us do it soon, James. Let us start our life together as soon as we possibly can." "Next month," he said. "That will give me time to talk to Mr. Mitchell about building a cabin on ranch land if he will allow it. Some of the married hands have their own places. If I can arrange that, we would have a home to start in." "I do not care where we live as long as we are together," Sarah said honestly. "We could live in a tent and I would be happy." "You deserve better than a tent," James said firmly. "You deserve a real home with a real roof and walls and windows. I will give you that, Sarah. I promise." They spent the rest of that afternoon making plans, talking about the future, dreaming together. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast and wonderful, ready to leap into the unknown with complete trust that they would catch each other. When James finally had to leave, riding back to the ranch before full dark, Sarah stood in the doorway and watched him go with her hand pressed over her heart. The ring on her finger caught the last light of the setting sun, sending small sparks of blue fire dancing across her skin. She was engaged. She was going to be married. She was going to be Sarah Brennan, wife of James, partner in a life they would build together from nothing but love and determination and hope. The thought was dizzying, terrifying, exhilarating beyond words. Mr. Henderson found her standing there and cleared his throat. "I take it that cowboy of yours had something important to say." Sarah turned to him, unable to stop smiling. "We are getting married. Next month." To her surprise, Mr. Henderson's stern face creased into something almost like a smile. "Well, I suppose I should start looking for a new shop assistant then." "I can keep working until the wedding," Sarah offered, but he shook his head. "You will be busy preparing. Besides, you have worked hard for me this past year, Sarah. You deserve some happiness. Your father would be glad to see you settled with a good man." "Thank you," Sarah said, and impulsively hugged him. He stiffened in surprise but patted her back awkwardly before stepping away. "Yes, well. Enough of that. Go rest. You have a wedding to plan." Sarah did not need to be told twice. She hurried up to her room and sat on her bed, staring at the ring on her finger and trying to convince herself that this was real, that her life was truly about to change. She thought of her father, of how he had worried about leaving her alone in the world with no one to care for her. If he could see her now, he would be glad. He would like James, she thought. He would approve of his strength and his honesty and his determination to build a good life. "I am going to be happy, Papa," she whispered to the empty room. "I am going to have the life you wanted for me. I hope you can see that, wherever you are." The next month passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. James spoke to Mr. Mitchell and received permission to build a small cabin on ranch property. The other hands helped him construct it in their spare time, and though Sarah was not allowed to see it until after the wedding, James assured her it was sound and solid and had windows that looked out over the valley. "You are going to love it," he said during one of their Sunday visits. "I made sure there was space for all your books, and I built you a shelf by the window where you can sit and read." Sarah's eyes filled with tears at the thoughtfulness. "You built me a reading nook. I want you to be happy there," James said simply. "I want it to feel like home." They decided to hold the wedding in the church in Malad City, with just a few witnesses. Sarah had no family to invite, and James's brothers were too far away to make the journey on such short notice. But Mrs. Chen promised to attend, and Mr. Henderson agreed to give Sarah away, and a few of the ranch hands said they would come to support James. Sarah had one good dress that could serve as a wedding gown, and Mrs. Chen insisted on making her a new one as a gift. "Every bride deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day," the older woman said firmly, and set to work creating a simple but lovely gown in cream-colored cotton with delicate embroidery around the collar and cuffs. The night before the wedding, Sarah could barely sleep. She lay in her narrow bed for the last time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that was about to change. Tomorrow she would become a wife. Tomorrow she would leave this room and start a new life. Tomorrow everything would be different. She was not frightened, she realized. She was excited, eager, ready to step into this new chapter with James by her side. Whatever challenges they faced, they would face together, and that made all the difference. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Sarah woke early and took special care with her appearance, washing her hair and pinning it up in soft curls that framed her face. Mrs. Chen arrived to help her into the new dress, and when Sarah looked at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She looked happy. She looked loved. She looked like a bride. "Beautiful," Mrs. Chen pronounced. "Your cowboy will fall over his own feet when he sees you." They walked to the church together, and Sarah was surprised to see more people gathered than she had expected. Apparently word had spread about the wedding, and half the town had come out to witness the orphaned Winters girl marrying her cowboy. Instead of feeling exposed, Sarah felt supported, surrounded by community in a way she never had before. Then the church doors opened and she saw James standing at the front, and everyone else faded away. He was dressed in new clothes, his dark hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven, and when he saw her walking down the aisle toward him, his expression transformed into pure awe. "Sarah," he breathed when she reached him, "you are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "So are you," she whispered back and meant it. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They spoke their vows in clear, strong voices, promising to love and honor and cherish each other for as long as they both lived. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, James kissed her with such tenderness that Sarah felt her heart might overflow with joy. Then they were walking back down the aisle together, hand in hand, husband and wife, and the small congregation cheered and threw handfuls of rice that rained down on them like blessings. Outside the church, James lifted her onto his horse and swung up behind her, his arms coming around her waist. "Ready to see your new home, Mrs. Brennan, Mrs. Brennan. Sarah's new name, her new identity, her new life. I am ready," she said. "Take me home." The ride to the Barham Ranch took less than an hour, and Sarah spent every minute of it leaning back against James's chest, feeling his heartbeat against her spine, breathing in the scent of grass and sage and summer wind. She had never been this far from town before, and the vastness of the landscape awed her, the endless rolling grasslands stretching away to mountains that rose purple and majestic in the distance. "It is so beautiful," she said. "Wait until you see the cabin," James promised. When they crested a small rise and Sarah saw their new home for the first time, she gasped. It was small, yes, just 2 rooms and a porch, but it sat in a perfect spot overlooking a valley where cattle grazed peacefully. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the windows James had promised gleamed in the afternoon sun. He helped her down and led her inside, watching her face anxiously as she took in their home. The main room held a table, 2 chairs, a stove and the promised reading nook, a cushioned bench beneath a wide window with bookshelves on either side. The bedroom beyond held a bed piled with quilts, a washstand, and a trunk for their clothes. It was simple, rough in places, clearly built by hands more used to working with cattle than carpentry. But it was clean and solid and made with love, and Sarah could not have asked for anything more perfect. "You like it?" James asked, and she could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Sarah turned to him, tears streaming down her face, and threw her arms around his neck. "I love it. I love you. I love everything about this day and this place and this life we are starting together." He held her close, relief and happiness radiating from him. "I was so worried you would think it was too rough, too far from town, too lonely." "How could I be lonely when I have you?" Sarah pulled back to look at him. "This is everything I ever dreamed of, James. A home, a partner, a future. You gave me all of that." "We gave it to each other," he corrected gently. "I was just as lost as you before we found each other, Sarah. Maybe more so. You gave my life meaning again. You gave me a reason to work for something beyond the next paycheck, the next season. You are my home now, no matter where we are." Sarah kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and felt him smile against her lips. They stood there in their new home, wrapped in each other's arms, and let the moment stretch out into something holy. That night, as husband and wife, they came together with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless and awed. Sarah had been nervous, uncertain of what to expect, but James was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished every moment. And when they finally lay tangled together in the darkness, her head on his chest and his arms around her, Sarah thought she had never known such perfect contentment. "I love you," she whispered into the quiet. "I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "And I will love you just as long," James promised. "You are mine and I am yours for all the days of our lives." They fell asleep like that, hearts beating in rhythm, two lives joined into one. The first months of marriage were an adjustment, but a joyful one. Sarah learned to manage a household on minimal resources, to cook on a wood stove, to tend a small garden that James helped her plant behind the cabin. He taught her to ride so she could accompany him sometimes when he worked with the cattle in the near pastures, and she taught him to read better, sitting with him in the evenings and helping him sound out words from the books she loved. They settled into a comfortable routine. James worked long days on the ranch, and Sarah kept the home, mended clothes, prepared meals, and found contentment in the simple domestic tasks she had once done for survival but now did for love. On Sundays, they would sometimes ride into town so Sarah could visit with Mrs. Chen or pick up supplies, and she always noticed the approving looks from townspeople who had watched her transform from struggling shopgirl to glowing bride. "You look well," Mr. Henderson told her on one such visit. "Marriage agrees with you." "It does," Sarah agreed. "I have never been happier." As summer faded into autumn, Sarah began to suspect that their family might soon be growing. Her monthly courses had stopped, and she felt tired in the mornings in a way she never had before. She said nothing to James at first, wanting to be certain, but when 2 months had passed with no change, she could not keep the secret any longer. She told him one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the valley in brilliant shades of orange and gold. "James, I think I might be with child." He went very still beside her, and for a terrifying moment Sarah thought he might be upset. But then he turned to her with wonder written across his face. "Truly, I think so. I am fairly certain." A slow smile spread across his face, growing until it was wider than she had ever seen. "We are going to have a baby." "We are going to have a baby," Sarah confirmed, and then laughed as he swept her into his arms and spun her around, both of them grinning like fools. "A baby," he kept saying. "Sarah, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" she asked, though his joy was obvious. "Happy, I am ecstatic, terrified, overwhelmed, the happiest I have ever been." He set her down carefully as if she had suddenly become fragile. "We need to make sure you are well cared for. You should see a doctor and you should not be working so hard, and we need to prepare a space for the baby." "James," Sarah said, laughing, "I am fine. Women have babies all the time. I do not need to be treated like glass." But he fussed over her anyway, and Sarah found she did not mind. It was nice to be cared for, to be treated as precious and important. She let him help her with tasks she could have easily done herself. Let him bring her extra pillows and make sure she was comfortable. Let him talk endlessly about their future child and what kind of parent he hoped to be. Winter came, and Sarah's belly grew round with their child. The other ranch wives welcomed her into their circle, sharing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and the kind of practical wisdom that could not be found in books. Sarah felt herself becoming part of a community in a way she never had in town. These women who understood the challenges of ranch life and supported each other through them. The baby was born in early April, during a spring rainstorm that drummed on the roof and made the whole world feel cozy and intimate. The birth was hard, hours of pain that left Sarah exhausted and wondering if she would survive. But when the midwife finally placed a squalling infant in her arms, every moment of suffering became worth it. "A son," the midwife announced, "a healthy baby boy." James, who had been banished to the main room during the birth, was allowed back in. He approached the bed slowly, reverently, his eyes wide as he looked down at the tiny person they had created together. "He is perfect," James whispered. "Sarah, he is absolutely perfect." The baby had dark hair like his father and blue eyes that might change color as he grew. His little face was red and scrunched, and he waved tiny fists in the air as he cried. Sarah thought he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "What should we name him?" she asked. They had discussed names for months but had never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, James said, "What about Matthew, after my brother?" Sarah considered this and nodded. "Matthew Brennan, I like it." "Hello, Matthew. Welcome to the world, little one." The baby calmed at the sound of her voice, his eyes trying to focus on her face, and Sarah felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it was almost painful. This was her son, her child, a part of her and James, proof of their love made flesh. The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and overwhelming and absolutely wonderful. Sarah learned to function on very little sleep, to feed the baby at all hours, to soothe his cries and change his diapers and marvel at every tiny thing he did. James helped as much as he could between his ranch duties, walking the floor with Matthew when he fussed at night, singing him soft lullabies in his rough voice, staring at him with such adoration that Sarah sometimes had to look away before she started crying from the sweetness of it. "I never knew I could love anyone this much," James confessed one night, holding his sleeping son against his chest. "You and Matthew, you are my whole world." "And you are ours," Sarah said softly. As Matthew grew from newborn to infant, the cabin filled with the sounds of his babbling and laughter. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, curious about everything. Sarah chronicled every milestone in the journal James gave her, wanting to remember these precious early days forever. When Matthew was 6 months old, James came home one evening with news. "Mr. Mitchell offered me a promotion," he said. "Head wrangler with a raise in pay. It would mean longer hours sometimes, but also more stability, better money." "That is wonderful," Sarah said, genuinely pleased. "You have worked so hard. You deserve this." "I want to use the extra money to expand the cabin," James said. "Add another room, maybe two. I want to give our family space to grow." Sarah understood what he was saying. They both wanted more children, had talked about it often. "I think that is a wonderful idea." Over the next year, James and the other hands expanded the cabin, adding 2 bedrooms and a larger kitchen. It was still modest by any standard, but it felt spacious and comfortable, a real home for their growing family. And grow their family did. When Matthew was 18 months old, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect. And in the autumn of 1885, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. Rose was different from Matthew in every way. Where he had been calm and easy, she was fussy and particular. Where he had been content to observe, she demanded attention. But she was also beautiful, with Sarah's light hair and James's gray eyes, and from the moment she was born, her older brother adored her. "Baby," Matthew would say, toddling over to peer into her cradle. "My baby." "That is right," Sarah would tell him. "Your baby sister, you have to help Mama take care of her." And he did in his own toddler way, bringing Rose his favorite toys and trying to comfort her when she cried. Watching her children together filled Sarah with such joy, she sometimes felt she might burst from it. The years passed in a blur of domestic happiness, punctuated by the usual challenges of ranch life. There were hard winters when money was tight and food was scarce, spring floods that washed out fences and scattered cattle, summer droughts that turned the grass brown and made the animals restless. But through it all, Sarah and James faced each difficulty together, their partnership growing stronger with each trial they overcame. When Matthew was 5 and Rose was 3, Sarah gave birth to twins, a boy and girl they named Luke and Lily. The cabin that had once seemed so spacious now felt crowded, but Sarah did not mind. She loved the noise and chaos of a full house, loved being surrounded by children and laughter and life. James was a wonderful father, patient and kind but firm when necessary. He taught Matthew to ride and rope, read stories to Rose every night, bounced the twins on his knees until they shrieked with laughter. And he loved Sarah with a constancy that never wavered, still looking at her across crowded rooms like she was the answer to every prayer he had never known to pray. "I cannot believe this is my life," Sarah said one evening after they had finally gotten all 4 children to sleep. She sat on the porch with James, leaning against his shoulder and looking out at the valley bathed in moonlight. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure I am not dreaming." "If you are dreaming, I am dreaming the same dream," James said, kissing the top of her head. "And I never want to wake up. Do you remember the night we met? When I was trying to mend your shirt and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the needle." "I remember," James said softly. "I remember thinking you were the bravest, most stubborn woman I had ever met. I remember how you tried so hard to hide how scared you were, how alone. I remember covering your hands with mine and feeling like I was touching something sacred." Sarah turned to look at him, this man who had become her whole world. Gray threaded his dark hair now, and the sun had etched deeper lines around his eyes. But to her, he was still the handsome cowboy who had walked into a general store and changed her life forever. "I am so glad you asked me to stay," she whispered. "I am so glad I was brave enough to say yes." "I am glad too," James said. "Every single day I thank God or fate or whatever power brought you into my life. You are my greatest blessing, Sarah, you and our children. Everything good in my life started the moment I met you." They sat together in the moonlight, comfortable in the silence that comes from years of partnership, from knowing each other so deeply that words are not always necessary. Inside the cabin, one of the twins started crying and Sarah sighed and prepared to stand, but James held her in place. "I will go," he said. "You rest. You have been on your feet all day." Sarah watched him disappear into the house, heard his low voice soothing whichever child had woken, and felt her heart swell with love. This was her life now. This messy, chaotic, beautiful life with a man who loved her unconditionally and children who filled their home with joy. It was everything she had never dared to dream of, back when she was a lonely girl patching a stranger's shirt with trembling hands. Everything and more. The children grew, as children do. Matthew became a serious, responsible boy who idolized his father and wanted nothing more than to be a cowboy like him. Rose developed a stubborn streak a mile wide and a fierce independence that reminded everyone of Sarah. The twins, Luke and Lily, were inseparable, inventing elaborate games and getting into mischief with alarming regularity. Sarah taught them all to read, gathered them around the table each morning for lessons in arithmetic and writing and history. She told them stories of her own childhood, of their grandparents they would never meet, of the importance of education and kindness, and standing up for what was right. James taught them about the land, about respecting animals and nature, about the value of hard work and keeping your word. He took them riding across the grasslands, showed them how to track deer and identify edible plants, instilled in them a deep love for the wild places. Together, Sarah and James built not just a family but a legacy, raising children who were confident and capable and good. When Matthew turned 16, Mr. Mitchell offered him a job as a ranch hand. Sarah's heart hurt at the thought of her firstborn working such long, hard days, but she was also proud. Matthew was becoming a man, following in his father's footsteps, and there was honor in that. Rose announced at 14 that she wanted to be a teacher, and Sarah and James scrimped and saved to send her to the teaching school in Pocatello for training. It was difficult being separated from their daughter, but when Rose returned with her certificate and secured a position teaching at the small school in Malad City, their pride knew no bounds. The twins, now 12, showed different interests. Luke wanted to ranch like his father and brother, but Lily had inherited her mother's love of books and talked about becoming a writer someday. Sarah encouraged her, knowing how important it was for women to have dreams beyond marriage and motherhood, as much as she herself had found happiness in those roles. Time moved on, seasons cycling through with relentless regularity. Sarah's hair began to gray, and James developed a limp from an old injury that acted up in cold weather. But they were still healthy, still active, still deeply in love after more than 20 years of marriage. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset like they had done countless times before, James took her hand. "I have been thinking," he said. "About what? About how far we have come. About how that terrified girl in a room above a store became the strongest woman I know. About how a drifting cowboy became a husband and father with roots that go deeper than he ever imagined possible." Sarah squeezed his hand. "We built a good life, did we not? The best life," James confirmed. "And I want you to know, Sarah, that if I could go back and change anything, I would not. Every choice, every struggle, every joy and sorrow, all of it was worth it because it brought me here to this moment with you." "I feel the same," Sarah said softly. "I would not change a single thing." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky fade from gold to purple to deep blue. The sounds of their children drifted out from the house, Matthew and Luke arguing good-naturedly about something, Rose laughing at something Lily said. The sounds of family, of home, of a life well lived. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Sarah asked. "When you were holding my hand steady and I was trying so hard not to fall apart, I asked you to stay," James said. "I asked you not to pull away, not to let fear stop you from giving me a chance." "And I am so glad I listened," Sarah said. "You gave me everything I did not know I needed. You gave me love and safety and a family and a future. You gave me myself back, James. The parts of me that I had lost to grief and hardship, you helped me find them again. We saved each other, James said simply. I was just as lost as you were. We found each other at exactly the right moment and we held on. That is what matters. We held on. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence beside her. I love you, she said. I will love you always. And I love you, James replied. Always and forever. They sat together as night fell completely, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to navigate together. But tonight, they were content to simply be. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from nothing but love and determination and hope. Inside, their children called for them, wanting help with some question or comfort for some small hurt. Sarah and James stood together, hands still clasped, and walked into their home, into their life, into the beautiful ordinariness of family and love and belonging. It was everything. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was the happily ever after that Sarah had stopped believing in, until a cowboy with storm-colored eyes steadied her trembling hands and asked her to stay. And she had stayed. Through all the years and all the changes, through joy and sorrow, triumph and trial, she had stayed. They had stayed together, and it had made all the difference. As the years continued to unfold, Sarah and James watched their children build lives of their own. Matthew married a sweet-natured girl named Emma from a neighboring ranch, and they had two children who called Sarah and James Grandma and Grandpa with squealing delight. Rose married the new doctor who came to Malad City, a kind man named Thomas who treated his wife as an equal partner and encouraged her to keep teaching even after they wed. Luke took over more and more responsibilities at the bar as James gradually reduced his hours, and Lily did indeed become a writer, publishing stories in magazines and newspapers under her own name. Sarah kept every clipping, pasting them carefully into a scrapbook she would pull out whenever anyone visited. Mr. Mitchell eventually retired, and his son took over running the ranch. By then, James had been promoted to ranch foreman, a position of respect and responsibility that came with a larger house closer to the main ranch buildings. Sarah was reluctant to leave their cabin at first, so full of memories as it was, but the new house had room for all their children and grandchildren to visit at once, and she quickly grew to love it. Mrs. Chen passed away peacefully in her sleep when she was well into her 70s, and Sarah grieved the loss of one of her few true friends. But she honored her memory by continuing to visit other newcomers and lonely souls in town, offering the same kindness that Mrs. Chen had shown her all those years ago. Sarah herself became something of a matriarch in the community, known for her wisdom, her kindness, and her willingness to help anyone in need. Young brides sought her advice, mothers brought their sick children to her for remedies and comfort, and troubled souls found her a sympathetic listener. She never forgot what it felt like to be alone and struggling, and she made sure no one in her orbit had to face hardship without support. James remained her constant companion through it all. They grew old together with grace and dignity, their love deepening with each passing year. On their 25th wedding anniversary, James commissioned a portrait of them together, the artist capturing Sarah with her gentle smile and James with his arm around her shoulders, both of them showing the marks of time, but also the contentment of a life well shared. 25 years, James marveled as they looked at the finished portrait. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know what you mean, Sarah said. Sometimes I still feel like that frightened girl, And then I look around at everything we have built and I can hardly believe it is real. It is real, James said firmly. Every bit of it. We earned it, Sarah. We worked for it and fought for it and never gave up on each other. This life is ours, and no one can take it from us. They celebrated their anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered around them, the house filled with laughter and love and the joyful chaos of family. Sarah looked around the table at the faces of the people she and James had brought into the world, at the legacy of love they had created, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. As they grew even older, their children began to take care of them in the small ways that marked the reversal of roles. Matthew helped his father with tasks that had become difficult, and Rose visited often to help her mother with housework. The twins, now adults with lives of their own, made sure their parents never lacked for anything they needed. But Sarah and James were not ready to stop living yet. They still took walks together every evening, still sat on the porch and watched the sunset, still held hands and talked about everything and nothing. Their bodies might be slowing down, but their hearts remained young, their love as vibrant as ever. On their 40th anniversary, the whole family gathered again, 3 generations now, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren toddling around. Someone asked James the secret to such a long and happy marriage. He looked at Sarah, his eyes still holding that same warmth they had on the night they met, and said, "The secret is finding the right person and then choosing them every single day. It is being partners in everything, supporting each other through good times and bad, never forgetting why you fell in love in the first place. And what made you fall in love with Grandma?" one of the older grandchildren asked. James smiled. Her courage, her kindness. The way her hands trembled when she was scared, but she did what needed to be done anyway. The way she looked at me like I was worth something when I was just a drifter with nothing to offer but a worn-out shirt that needed mending. He took Sarah's hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. I asked her to stay with me to give me a chance, and she was brave enough to say yes. Best decision either of us ever made. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, still moved by his words after all these years. The best decision, she agreed softly. They were well into their 60s now, both of them slowing down considerably. James's limp had worsened, and Sarah sometimes forgot things, misplacing items or losing the thread of conversations. But they took care of each other, compensating for each other's weaknesses, just as they always had. One morning, Sarah woke to find James lying very still beside her. For one terrible moment, she thought he had passed in the night, but then she saw the gentle rise and fall of his chest and relaxed. She watched him sleep, studying the face she knew better than her own, tracing with her eyes the lines and scars and imperfections that made him uniquely himself. He was beautiful to her still, this man who had steadied her trembling hands and changed the course of her life. He was everything she needed, everything she wanted, everything she had never dared to dream of finding. His eyes opened slowly, and when he saw her watching him, he smiled. "Good morning, my love." "Good morning," she replied. "How are you feeling, old?" he said with a rueful laugh. "But grateful. Every day I wake up next to you is a good day." They rose and went about their morning routine, moving slowly but contentedly. Sarah made coffee while James started a fire against the early morning chill. They ate breakfast together, talking about their plans for the day, which were modest now, consisting mainly of sitting on the porch and enjoying the sunshine. Matthew stopped by mid-morning with news that his daughter was engaged to be married. "The wedding will be in the fall," he said. "They want you both there, of course." "We will be there," Sarah promised, already thinking about what she might wear, whether she was well enough to travel into town for the ceremony. The wedding, when it came, was beautiful. Sarah and James sat in places of honor, watching their granddaughter marry her sweetheart, seeing their own story reflected in the young couple's hopeful faces. It was a reminder that love endures, that it passes from generation to generation, that what they had built together would outlast them. Winter came, hard and cold. Sarah caught a chill that settled into her chest and would not quite leave. She tired easily, spent more time resting than she liked. James fretted over her constantly, bringing her blankets and hot tea, reading to her from her favorite books when she was too tired to read herself. "You are going to wear yourself out taking care of me," Sarah scolded gently. "I have spent 40 years taking care of you," James said. "I am not about to stop now." The illness lingered through the winter, and by spring Sarah knew she was not getting better. She did not fear death exactly, but she mourned the thought of leaving James, of not being able to hold his hand or hear his voice or see his face. "Promise me something," she said one quiet evening as they sat together. "Anything," James said immediately. "Promise me you will be all right when I am gone, that you will let the children take care of you, that you will not give up on living just because I am not here anymore." "Sarah," he said, his voice breaking, "do not talk like that. You are going to get better." "We both know I am not," she said gently, "and that is all right. I have had a wonderful life, James, more than I ever dreamed possible. I have been loved and cherished and valued. I have raised beautiful children and seen them raise children of their own. I have known happiness beyond measure. If my time is ending, I am ready, but I need to know you will be okay." Tears streamed down his weathered face. "I do not know how to be without you." "You will never be without me," Sarah said, reaching up to touch his cheek. "I will be with you always in every memory, every laugh, every sunset you watch from this porch. I will be in the faces of our children and grandchildren. I will be in your heart, James, always." He caught her hand and pressed it to his lips. "I love you. God, Sarah, I love you so much. And I love you," she whispered. "That will never change, not even death can touch that." Sarah passed peacefully in her sleep 3 days later, with James holding her hand and their children gathered around. The grief was profound, a tidal wave that threatened to drown them all, but especially James, who had lost his partner of 42 years, his best friend, the love of his life. The funeral was well attended, the church packed with people whose lives Sarah had touched over the years. Person after person stood to speak of her kindness, her wisdom, her gentle strength. They spoke of how she had welcomed newcomers, comforted the grieving, helped the struggling, always with a soft word and a warm heart. James sat through it all in numb silence, barely hearing the words. Without Sarah beside him, the world felt colorless, empty, wrong. How was he supposed to go on without her? How was he supposed to face each day knowing she would not be there? But he had made her a promise, and James Brennan had never broken a promise in his life. So he kept living, even though it hurt. He let his children care for him, moved in with Matthew and Emma so he would not be alone. He spent his days sitting on their porch, watching the valley that he and Sarah had loved, talking to her in his mind, telling her about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the changing seasons, about how much he missed her. He lived for 5 more years after Sarah's death, years marked by quiet grief, but also by gratitude for the time they had had together. When his own time came, he went peacefully in his sleep, and his children liked to think that Sarah had come to guide him home, to take his hand one last time and lead him to whatever came next. They buried him beside her in the small cemetery outside Malad City, their graves marked with simple headstones that bore their names and dates and the inscription, "Together always." And their story lived on in the memories of their children and grandchildren. in the tales passed down through generations, of how a lonely girl and a drifting cowboy found each other one evening in 1882, how his steady hands had calmed her trembling ones, how he had asked her to stay and she had been brave enough to say yes, and how from that moment of connection had grown a love that shaped not just their lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. It was a simple story, really. But like all the best love stories, it was true, and it was real, and it mattered. And though Sarah and James were gone, the love they had shared remained, woven into the fabric of the land they had called home, living on in the hearts of those who remembered them, a testament to the enduring power of courage and hope, and two souls brave enough to reach for happiness, even when it seemed impossible. Their story was complete now, every chapter written, every promise kept. But the legacy they built together would continue for generations, proof that love, real and true and lasting, could transform the world. In a small cabin in Idaho, the one James had built with his own hands, a great-great-granddaughter named Sarah found a box of letters and journals carefully preserved. She spent an entire afternoon reading her ancestors' words, learning about the woman she had been named for, about the cowboy who had loved her, about the life they had built from nothing but determination and hope. When she finished, young Sarah wiped tears from her eyes and held the worn journal to her chest. She understood now why her family spoke of James and Sarah with such reverence, why their story had been passed down so carefully. They had shown what was possible when two people chose love over fear, when they committed to building something beautiful together, no matter the obstacles. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when bodies fail, Sarah and James walked hand in hand through endless grasslands under endless sky, together as they had always meant to be, their trembling transformed to strength, their hope fulfilled beyond measure, their love eternal and complete. The end.